Why is there a whale on it? 10-year-old orphan Caleb wondered as he picked up an old compass on Lighthouse Point. He was stunned to realize it's exactly like the symbol I carved for my sister Emily years ago, but that was just the beginning. What happened next truly left everyone speechless. From a distance, the craftsman Arthur froze. His heart tightened as he saw the boy holding the only memento of his daughter. Little did he know that accidentally dropped compass was about to reveal a heartbreaking truth, a long-buried loss that would connect two strangers in an unexpected way. While waiting for the next development, if you love this story, please support us with a subscribe and a like. It would be great if you leave a comment letting us know where you're watching from. Arthur gave the small wooden sailboat a final touch. "It's done, Sarah," he whispered, as if his daughter were still by his side. He carefully opened an old velvet box. Inside was the brass compass, Sarah's last keepsake. He flipped it over, gazing at the clumsily carved whale. He still remembered her words from that day. "So Dad never loses his way home." "I won't lose my way, my girl," Arthur said softly, then gently placed the compass inside the boat's hull. He didn't fasten it, just set it there loosely, like a tiny passenger on a memorial voyage. He cradled the boat, his heart heavy, and walked out onto Lighthouse Point. The sea wind blew stronger than usual. As he neared the end of the pier, a loud horn from a nearby ferry suddenly blared, tearing through the air. Arthur flinched and stumbled slightly. In that swaying moment, the small brass compass silently slipped out of the boat's hull. It fell to the wooden deck with a tiny clink, drowned out by the ferry horn and the waves, then rolled straight into a gap between two planks. Arthur let out a breath, steadying himself. He had no idea what had just happened. Looking down at the boat, still intact in his hands, he continued to the edge of the pier. He knelt, gently placing the boat on the water. "Go find your mom and me, Sarah," he said, his voice hoarse. He watched it drift further away, believing his most precious memento was sailing with it. He didn't know that what he had just entrusted to the sea was merely an empty shell, while the true treasure had been left behind, lying silently in the dark crevice of the wooden pier. Several hours later, as the sun began to set, Lighthouse Point was bustling again with laborers. "Hurry up, you lazy boy," his uncle's grumpy voice rang out. "Clean up these torn nets or you'll go hungry tonight." Caleb bit his lip, silently dragging the heavy old nets. He was used to the scolding and his empty stomach. His uncle, Uncle Frank, treated him as nothing more than a hired hand. While sweeping debris near the edge of the pier, Caleb's broom nudged something metallic, making a soft clink. Curious, he bent down to peer into the gap between two wooden planks. A round brass object glimmered faintly. The boy quickly used a small stick to pry it out. It was an old compass, looking quite valuable. Caleb's heart pounded. This must fetch a good price, he thought. An image of a hot loaf of bread appearing in his mind. At least enough for a few full meals. But as he flipped the compass over in his palm, his hand suddenly froze. His eyes widened. On the back of the worn brass was a small engraving, a whimsical and familiar-looking whale. Caleb was stunned. He remembered clearly. It was he who had used his father's small knife to carve an identical image onto a small wooden boat for his sister Emily just before the storm hit and took her away forever. "Emily," Caleb whispered, his sister's name a sharp ache in his heart. "What are you dawdling there for?" His uncle's voice rang out again from behind him, full of suspicion. "Found something? Let me see." Caleb jumped. His first instinct was to clutch the compass tightly and quickly hide it in his tattered pocket. "No, nothing, Uncle," he lied, his voice trembling slightly. "Just a pretty seashell." His uncle glared at him and then turned away. Caleb breathed a sigh of relief, but inside his chest was a tangled mess. This compass was no longer just an item to sell for money. It was a mystery, a connection to the memory of his lost sister. Why was his carving on this compass? And who was its owner? That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He lay curled up on his thin straw mattress, one hand under his head, the other gripping the compass in his pocket. Moonlight filtered through a gap in the wooden wall, casting a silver streak on the floor. His stomach growled with hunger. He thought of the pawnbroker at the end of the street. "Just give it to him," a voice in his head whispered. "There'll be money for bread, for hot soup. Uncle Frank will never know." But then he took the compass out again to look at it. Under the moonlight, the small whale seemed to swim. Memories of Emily flooded back. He remembered how his sister's eyes had crinkled with laughter when he finished the carving. Selling this compass, would it be any different from selling the last piece of memory of her? No, Caleb told himself. I have to find its owner. I have to know why they have this drawing. The decision was made. The hunger seemed to lessen, replaced by a strange determination. The next morning, when the sky was still misty and Uncle Frank's snores still resonated steadily, Caleb stealthily got up. He quickly shoved a piece of dry bread into his pocket, along with the precious compass, then held his breath and sneaked out of the house. He began his search at Lighthouse Point, where he had found it. He approached a busy fishmonger. "Excuse me, sir," Caleb timidly asked. "Do you know anyone who lost a compass? It has a whale carved on it." The fishmonger glanced at him and waved him away. Don't know. Go play somewhere else. Don't bother my business." Caleb trudged away, the first pang of disappointment rising. He asked a few more people, but the answers were just headshakes or indifferent stares. As he was about to ask a group of fishermen mending nets, a large, gruff-looking man blocked his way. He stared intently at the compass Caleb was holding. "Hey, kid, where did you get that?" he growled. "Sir, I found it," Caleb replied, scared. "I'm looking for its owner to return it." The man scoffed. "Return it? A ragged kid like you knows how to return things? You stole it, didn't you?" Saying that, he reached out to snatch the compass. "Give it here!" "No!" Caleb screamed, panicked. He clutched the compass tightly and huddled back. "I didn't steal it!" "Thief!" The accusation rang out, causing those around to start staring at him, full of suspicion. Terrified, Caleb used all his strength to push the man away and ran headlong. He ran wildly, not daring to look back, the curses and scrutinizing gazes seeming to chase him. He ran until he disappeared into a small alleyway, exhausted and his heart pounding like a drum. The boy collapsed, panting, tears starting to well up. Why was returning something so hard? Caleb walked despondently out of the alleyway, his heart heavy. He didn't dare go back to Lighthouse Point. What should he do now? Returning the compass seemed an impossible task. He wandered along the coastal road, his mind blank. He passed a small cabin, where fishing nets were drying on the porch. An elderly woman with white hair and kind eyes sat on a wooden chair, her hands deftly mending a torn net. Noticing Caleb's small, sad figure, she called out gently, "Come here, little boy. Rest a bit. You look very tired." Caleb flinched, instinctively taking a step back. He was scared, worried that he would be scolded again. Seeing the boy's frightened look, the woman smiled warmly. "Don't be afraid. I'm Clara. I won't hurt you. Have some water to quench your thirst, dear?" The kindness in her voice reassured Caleb. The boy timidly approached. Clara poured him a cool glass of water. After drinking it all, Caleb gathered his courage and held out the compass. "Excuse me, ma'am. Do you know whose this is?" he whispered. "I found it, and I want to return it to its owner." Clara's hands, busy mending the net, suddenly paused. She squinted at the object in the boy's hand, then her eyes widened in surprise. "Oh my!" she exclaimed. "Let me see." Caleb placed the compass in her palm. Clara flipped it over, her trembling finger lightly tracing the small whale carving. A fleeting sadness crossed her face. "I know this compass," she said, her voice low. "It belongs to Arthur." "Arthur?" Caleb looked up sharply, his eyes lighting up with a glimmer of hope. "Where is he?" Clara pointed towards Beacon Hill in the distance, where a small cabin stood alone overlooking the sea. "He's a craftsman, lives alone up there. A very lonely and unfortunate man." She looked deep into Caleb's eyes, her voice full of sympathy. "This compass is the last memento of his daughter, the little girl who was lost in a sea storm many years ago." Caleb nodded, his heart filled with determination. "Yes, I understand. Thank you, ma'am. I'll take it up the hill to him right away." The boy turned to leave, but Clara's gentle voice stopped him. "Wait, little boy." Caleb paused, turning back to look at her. Clara looked at him with a very strange gaze, both compassionate and hesitant. It's perhaps a bit more complicated than you think," she said slowly. "Arthur's daughter's name was Sarah. She wasn't lost alone." Caleb was puzzled. "She wasn't?" Clara looked him straight in the eyes, her next question almost a whisper. Are you Caleb, Emily's brother?" The unexpected question stunned Caleb. His whole body stiffened. It had been so long since anyone mentioned his sister's name. "How? How do you know my name and my sister's name?" Clara sighed, a sigh filled with years of sorrow, because Caleb, the little girl who was with Sarah on that small boat in the storm that day, was your sister, Emily. Caleb's world shattered. His ears rang, all sounds around him disappeared. The compass in his hand suddenly felt heavy. He stammered, unable to form words. "No, it can't be. My sister." Memories flooded back like a torrent. The small wooden boat that Emily loved so much, the whale carving he had made. Everything suddenly connected in a heartbreaking way. "The whale carving," he whispered. Clara nodded sadly, as if confirming everything. "That's right. Arthur knew. He knew his daughter had gone out to sea with your sister. He always felt tormented for not having stopped them in time." She paused for a moment, allowing Caleb time to process the terrible truth. Then she continued, her voice full of sorrow. "The small wooden boats he makes and releases into the sea every day, they're not just for Sarah. He makes them to commemorate both children." Caleb stood silently, tears starting to fall. He was no longer an orphan boy trying to do a good deed. He and the lonely craftsman on Beacon Hill, they were two strangers, yet connected by the same pain, the same unquenchable loss. The path up Beacon Hill was steep and rocky, but Caleb didn't feel tired. He walked, his heart pounding, Clara's words repeating in his mind. The pain of losing his sister was now mixed with a strange feeling, a connection to the man he had never met. Finally, he reached the small cabin. The workshop door was ajar. Inside, Caleb could see a man with graying hair, his back to him. He was diligently carving a piece of wood, his posture exuding a deep loneliness. That must be Arthur. Caleb took a deep breath to gather his courage, then timidly stepped to the door. "Sir," he called out, his voice small and slightly trembling. Arthur startled. He wasn't used to visitors. He turned, his tired and sad eyes looking at the strange boy standing at the threshold. His expression was a little grumpy, as if he didn't want to be disturbed. "Boy, what do you want?" His voice was hoarse and abrupt. Caleb said nothing, just quietly walked forward. The boy held out his small hand, palm open. The old brass compass lay silently there. Arthur's gaze immediately fixated on it. The grumpiness on his face vanished, replaced by a speechless astonishment. His hand, holding a tool, trembled slightly. He slowly put the carving knife down on the table. It's... Arthur could only utter one word. He looked up at Caleb, his eyes full of doubt and scrutiny. The sadness in his eyes was now mixed with wariness. You. Where did you get it? Caleb looked him straight in the eyes, his voice still trembling but very sincere. I found it at Lighthouse Point, sir, under a gap in the wooden planks. Arthur remained silent. He carefully took the compass from Caleb's hand. He flipped it over, his thumb stroking the familiar whale carving. A sense of relief flickered, but immediately followed by a question. A poor boy like this, why wouldn't he sell it? Why did you return it? Arthur asked, his voice still tinged with suspicion. It's worth quite a bit of money. Caleb shook his head. I couldn't sell it, because I knew it was very important to someone. Caleb's simple and honest answer seemed to touch Arthur. The icy wall he had built around himself for years began to crack. He looked at the boy more closely, no longer with scrutinizing eyes, but with genuine curiosity. For the first time in a long time, he saw something other than his own pain. He saw kindness. Arthur still clutched the compass tightly, his gaze seemingly lost in distant memories. Yes, he said softly, his voice full of emotion. It is very important. This was a gift from my daughter. Seeing Arthur's expression, Caleb gathered all his courage to ask what he had always wondered. Sir, why is there a whale on it? Arthur looked up, a little surprised by the boy's question. That's my daughter Sarah's drawing. She loved whales. Caleb took a deep breath. This was it. He looked directly into the sad eyes of the woodcarver. No, sir, the boy said firmly. This is my drawing. I carved it with a knife onto the small wooden boat for my sister, Emily. Each of Caleb's words was like a small hammer striking Arthur's mind. He froze, his eyes wide, staring at the boy without blinking. Emily? He repeated the name, a name he hadn't spoken aloud in years, but had never forgotten. Yes, Caleb nodded, tears starting to well up. Clara told me. She said my sister and your daughter went together on that boat. A silence enveloped the entire workshop. Arthur stared at the boy standing before him. Messy hair, worn clothes, and eyes carrying the same profound sadness as his own. All the scattered pieces suddenly came together into a heartbreakingly complete picture. This boy, this honest boy who returned his most precious keepsake, was indeed Emily's brother. He understood everything. The whale carving was not solely Sarah's or Emily's, but a shared symbol of the two children, an innocent friendship that ended in tragedy. So it was you, Arthur whispered, his voice trembling. The compass in his hand was no longer a mere memento. It was destiny. It had been lost, only to be found by the one person in the world who could fully understand its meaning. It had led two broken souls, two seemingly unrelated individuals, to find each other amidst the ocean of loneliness. He slowly walked over, placing his large, calloused hand on Caleb's small, thin shoulder. Instead of flinching in fear as usual, Caleb felt a strange warmth, a sense of safety he had never known. Where do you live? Arthur asked, his voice less distant now. I live with Uncle Frank down at Lighthouse Point, Caleb mumbled, but I don't want to go back there. The boy's eyes showed a familiar fear. Arthur looked deep into those eyes, seeing in them a reflection of himself, a lost soul yearning for a place to belong. He didn't need another second to think. The decision came to him naturally, as if it had been preordained. Then, stay here with me, Arthur said, his voice resolute. Caleb looked up sharply, his eyes wide with astonishment. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. Stay. Stay here? Arthur nodded, a sad but sincere smile appearing on his lips for the first time in years. Yes, I've lived alone for too long, Caleb. This sorrow, if one person carries it, it's too heavy. But if two people share it, perhaps it will be lighter. He looked out at the distant sea, the place that had taken their loved ones. Perhaps Sarah and Emily wanted us to find each other, to take care of each other. Tears now rolled down Caleb's cheeks again, but these were tears of happiness and hope. The boy couldn't speak a word, only nodded slightly, a nod that conveyed every answer. Arthur led Caleb inside the cabin. He placed the compass on his workbench, right next to the unfinished wooden boat. The relic of the past was no longer a symbol of loss, but had become a compass for a new future. From now on, Arthur said, it will guide both of us. The gentle sunset shone into the workshop, enveloping the two figures, one large and one small, standing side by side. The cabin on Beacon Hill was no longer cold. From the fragments of pain, a new family had been built, ready to move forward together on the journey of healing their emotional wounds. In the following days, the workshop on Beacon Hill was no longer silent. Instead of Arthur's solitary carving sounds, there was now Caleb's clear laughter. They worked together on a new sailboat, a little larger than the previous ones. When the boat was finished, Arthur didn't place the compass in it alone. He handed it to Caleb. This time, let's put it in together, he said. Both hands, one large and one small, together placed the keepsake into the boat's hull. They carried it together to Lighthouse Point, to the exact spot where Arthur had once stood alone. But this time, they didn't release the boat to drift away as a farewell. They tied a long string to it, letting it bob on the nearby waves as a promise that they would always be here, together. The sea was still there, still holding the memories of Sarah and Emily. But now, for Arthur and Caleb, it was not just a place of loss. It was also a place that witnessed a new family finding its peaceful haven, guided by a lost compass and the priceless gift of kindness.